as we talk about purism, the left, the Democrats, the Democratic establishment never made racism or sexism or classism or elitism red line in the sand because they never could afford to. Like we never had a situation where if you were president, you simply could not have any kind of racist baggage. That wasn't allowed. And that's because it would disqualify a lot of people on the right. I mean, on the left as well. It would definitely have disqualified Clinton. Like if we had if racism disqualified you from being president of the United States, Clinton could not have run either. And we're not just talking about her when she was 17. We're talking about her 8 years ago. The 2008 primary was one of the most racist primaries in the history of America in terms of Clinton versus Barack Obama. And so the left can whine about how America was just so racist and sexist, but they never actually wanted to change that in conversation. Like their solution to sexism in America, or their first step was electing a female president, like a white female, elite, rich, basically to the office, as shattering the glass ceiling. And I can understand the value in that. I definitely understand the value in breaking that barrier, but but before we break the glass ceiling, maybe we should shatter the concrete structure of racism. Maybe that's where we should start. And that has never been part of the conversation. It's always been these very, very lofty goals, these very, very high bars and very, very performative acts of like getting a female to the highest office. Like, okay, obviously we can't rank types of oppression because they're all based on the same structure. But, the glass ceiling has much less effect on people than, again, what I would call the concrete structure of racism. And by that I mean the fact that we don't have clean water in Flint, Michigan.
Well, what
you were going to say, David?
Yeah, and then Nick can come in. But I was just going to say, why is it that it's always these lofty terms and these nice sounding talking points as opposed to the real issues that would. You're never going to completely get rid of racism, at least not in our lifetime. But you can change things systematically that reduce it, and long term, you'll see that reduce. Why is it that you always see all these lofty things being said? It's easy. It's easy for politicians to run on it and make issues out of it, and then turn a blind eye once they have an easy solution that they can claim will resolve something.
Well,
I mean,
I think the answer to your question. I think the answer to your question would be because it's really not easy, and it's really not just a lofty goal. That what I'm saying. It's really easy to say, like you said, but it's really not easy to solve because race and class are tied together. And once you start trying to tackle class, you're cutting into somebody's money. And what I like to point out is whenever I start talking about money, people like to tell me, well, that has nothing to do with me. It's like, no. This is all related. You are suffering because somebody's profiting off your suffering. And I think that's probably the best way I have had to get people to realize why we should care about the dollars, why we should care about, things that affect us, because they have to understand that the situation that sucks for them is making someone else tons and tons of money. And that's why it's that way. And I think that's going to be the root. I think that's going to be the catalyst that people can kind of grasp around.
Well, I have a different answer for your question. That answer is because it won't really do anything. Like Clinton winning president would not have actually cost anyone any money. And so, like Nick says, this goes all back to what Martin Luther King Jr. was saying. Like people love solutions to racism and sexism and classism. At least the left does. The wealthy left, the elite left, love solutions to these lofty, these huge problems that won't actually cost anyone any money. That won't actually upset the status quo. Clinton winning would have upset the status quo in a very, very minimal way. It would have had no real effect on class or distribution of money. It just wouldn't have. And so when the mainstream left looks for narratives about how to solve racism, or how to solve classism, or how to solve sexism, although they don't really tackle classism, or how to solve homophobia or Islamophobia. They always look for narratives that are from rich people and whose definitions of racism and sexism and homophobia are just like, well, I don't like people saying mean words to me. Like I don't think like that's my like that is what racism and sexism is. And what the Democrats were unable to contend with this time around was, not everyone views it the way they do. Not everyone is allowing them to define the conversation about racism and sexism for them in a way that absolves the Democratic Party and the upper middle class elite from being implicated in those. And that's what the Democratic Party spent a lot of time trying to do this election. And that's why they failed a lot. They spent a lot of time trying to scapegoat large swaths of the populace for these structural problems and place blame. Here, Hillary Clinton, refer to her statements about her as a racist statement. And I think that would have gone relatively far. Like, they just sort of deflected, and they painted their adversaries, or rather their critics, whether they be on the left or on the right or in the middle or anywhere, as the real racist, because they weren't supporting the Democratic Party. They weren't towing the line. And that has been sort of the classic strategy of the Democratic elite for a very long time, that we have dominance because we won the culture war, quote unquote. And since we won the culture war, since we've become the arbiters over what is racist and sexist and prejudiced in America in terms of representation. And so if you do not align yourself with what we think these things are, you, by nature of not being aligned with us, sexist or X or Y or Z, and we're gonna paint you as such. We're gonna drag your name through the mud, even if you're Bernie Sanders, even if you're a black woman, even if you're even if you're a cripple, a disabled veteran, we're still gonna call you these things simply because these things are in liberalism as part of the Democratic strategy for winning the left has been to make liberalism intrinsic, or synonymous with being a Democrat. And so they don't feel the need to actively go out there and have their policies or their positions match the ideology of liberals or people on the left or progressives. They simply try to dominate. Well, we are the only metric for the left. Obama's not on the left. Obama's on the right. By any conceivable great spectrum, he's on the right. He's closer to Reagan than he is to FDR. Absolutely. And so Democratic strategy is just like, well, we call ourselves the left, and so if you're not with us, you're not the left.
Yeah, and I think a big important thing moving forward. I remember, David, you asked about what is the left to do about this. I would say the first order of business is to grab the definition of left, grab what that means, and wrest it from the neoliberals. Neoliberals should have no representation on the left at all.